The emergency beacon weighed 3 ounces. Captain Vesper Thorne had carried it for 9 years, through 18 deployments, across 4 continents. She'd never pressed the button. She'd never needed to. But someone else just had. The signal cut through the static on her radio like a scream. Not her beacon, someone else's. 18 miles away through hostile mountain terrain. A voice she didn't recognize, cracked with desperation. 20 rounds left. That's all we've got. 40 hostiles closing from 3 directions. 6 souls. Need immediate assistance. Anyone, please. Vesper stood alone on a ridge at 8,200 feet, the Hindu Kush Mountains stretching endlessly in every direction. Gray stone, white snow, the kind of silence that makes you hear your own heartbeat. She'd been here for 73 days, tracking, watching, waiting. A weapons convoy, 20 trucks, militia fighters moving hardware across the Afghan border into Pakistan. 73 days of surveillance, position logging, pattern analysis. 73 days of sleeping 4 hours a night in a hide site barely large enough to turn over. 73 days of freeze-dried rations and melted snow, and the constant, gnawing knowledge that one mistake would end her. The convoy was moving, right now. She could see them through her spotting scope. 20 trucks crawling through the valley below like a line of ants. This was it, the moment she'd waited for. The culmination of 2.5 months of work. And 18 miles away, 6 soldiers were dying. She looked at her GPS. The beacon signal pulsed, an insistent heartbeat demanding attention. 18 miles, mountainous terrain, hostile fighters between here and there. 3.5 hours minimum, running the entire way with 68 pounds of gear. 3.5 hours. By then, those 6 soldiers would be dead. Her radio crackled. Captain Thorne, this is base. We have your position. Do not, repeat, do not abandon your mission objective. That convoy is priority 1. Vesper stared at the trucks below. 73 days. And if she left now, they'd disappear into Pakistan, distribute those weapons to cells across the region. People would die. Maybe dozens, maybe hundreds. But 6 soldiers were dying right now. A voice whispered in her memory. Her father's voice. 10 years gone, but still so clear. Vesper girl, when you have to choose between the mission and the men, there's only one right answer. And it's never easy. She closed her eyes, saw her father's face. Gunnery Sergeant James Thorne. They'd called him Iron Hawk. 204 confirmed kills. 3 wars. 27 years of service. The best Marine Scout sniper instructor the Corps ever produced. He died on a ridge not unlike this one, Helmand Province, 2014. Vesper had been 21, a brand new lieutenant on her first deployment. She'd been 1,200 meters away when it happened, close enough to see through her scope, not close enough to stop it. Her father had called for help. She'd made the shot, killed the enemy sniper, but the bullet meant for her father was already in the air, already traveling, already unstoppable. She'd reached him in 30 seconds. 30 seconds too late. He died holding her hand. His last words, "You made the shot, Vesper girl. Never doubt yourself. Never be late for someone who needs you." Vesper opened her eyes, looked at the convoy below. 73 days of work. Then looked at the beacon signal on her GPS. 6 soldiers dying 18 miles away. Captain Thorne acknowledged, "Do not abandon mission objective." She reached down, switched off her radio. The silence returned. Just wind, just her heartbeat, just the choice. She was already running. The mountains didn't care about urgency. They were ancient, indifferent. They'd watched empires rise and fall. 6 soldiers meant nothing to geology. But Vesper wasn't asking the mountains for permission. She ran. 68 pounds of gear, M110 SAS rifle, 300 Winchester Magnum rounds, spotting scope, rangefinder, radio, medical kit, water. the weight distributed across her frame like a shell she'd learned to inhabit. At 5'4" and 118, she wasn't built for this, but her father had trained her anyway. Size doesn't matter if you know how to move, Vesper girl. Your body is a machine. Treat it like one. Her heart rate held at 68 beats per minute. Trained endurance. Marathon pace with full combat load. She'd done this before. Fort Benning, Georgia, when she was 16. Her father timing her with a stopwatch, making her run until her lungs screamed, then making her shoot. 5 rounds, 1,000 meters, all hits. Or they ran again. She'd hated him for it then. She understood it now. The terrain rose and fell like waves on a frozen ocean. 8,200 feet down to 6,400, then back up to 7,800. Her breath came in measured cycles. In through the nose for 4 counts, hold for 2, out through the mouth for 6. Oxygen efficiency. Her legs burned, ignored. Her shoulders ached from the pack straps, ignored. The rifle across her chest swung with each stride. Rhythm. Everything was rhythm. 18 miles became 17. 17 became 15. Her mind tracked time like a metronome. 3 hours, 12 minutes. That's what she had. 3 hours, 12 minutes to cover 18 miles. That was 17.6 minutes per mile. Impossible for most soldiers. Barely possible for her. But barely possible was still possible. The voice on the beacon hadn't called again. That could mean 2 things. Either they were maintaining radio silence to avoid detection, or they were already dead. She ran faster. 1,200 miles away, Staff Sergeant Garrett Blackwood had no idea anyone was coming. He knelt behind a granite wall that rose 4 feet high, watching his world end in slow motion. The depression they'd retreated to was maybe 30 feet across. A natural bowl carved into the mountainside over thousands of years. 3 walls of stone, the 4th side open. Beyond that open side, a 1,000-foot drop into a gorge that had no bottom in the fog. They were trapped. 40 enemy fighters, maybe more, closing from 3 directions. Night vision, drones, mortars, coordinated fire. This wasn't a chance encounter. This was a planned ambush. And Viper Recon had walked directly into the center of it. Garrett looked at his team. 6 soldiers. His responsibility. His family. Corporal Sarah Kincaid lay against the eastern wall, blonde hair matted with blood and granite dust. Both hands pressed against Private Dylan Mitchell's side. Dylan was unconscious, had been for 20 minutes. The shrapnel from the RPG had found something important inside him, something that bled dark and fast. Specialist Troy Brennan crouched at the northern wall, M240 machine gun braced on its bipod. Big man, former college linebacker, the kind of soldier who stayed calm when everything went to hell. He'd already burned through most of his ammunition, 400 rounds gone, 60 left, maybe 3 minutes of fire if he was careful. Lance Corporal Nathan Callahan sat against the western wall, his left arm bent at an angle that made Garrett's stomach turn. Compound fracture. The bone hadn't broken through skin yet, but it was close. Nate held his pistol in his right hand. 15 rounds. His face was chalk white. His jaw clenched so tight the muscles stood out like cables. Specialist Jordan Webb huddled behind the southern wall, radio pressed against his ear. 20 years old. First deployment. The kid had joined the Army because his father had, because his grandfather had, because serving was what the men in his family did. Now he was listening to his own death approach on enemy radio frequencies. And then there was Garrett, 34 years old, 12 years in uniform, 2 deployments to Iraq, 3 to Afghanistan, enough firefights to lose count, enough close calls to know that luck eventually runs out. He'd made peace with his own death years ago. Any soldier who served long enough eventually did. But watching his team die, his people, his brothers and sister, that was something no amount of training prepared you for. How many? He asked. I count 40. Sarah's voice was steady despite everything. She was good at this, too good. Maybe more in the fog. They've got thermals. I saw 2 drones before everything went to hell. Garrett had noticed. The enemy knew exactly where they were. Every position they took became a target within seconds. The drones overhead fed real-time intelligence to whoever was running this operation. Every time they moved, the mortar fire adjusted. The mortars were walking closer. The first round had hit 20 meters south, the second 15 meters. The third had collapsed part of the southern wall. Nate had been using that section for cover when it exploded. The blast had picked him up and slammed him into the granite like a doll thrown by an angry child. The fourth round would be on top of them. Ammunition status, Garrett said. Troy didn't take his eyes from his sights. 60 rounds, last belt. Maybe 2 minutes worth if I'm smart about it. Be very smart about it. Always am, Sarge. Nate's voice was barely a whisper. 15 rounds, pistol. That's all I got. Jordan looked up from his radio. His hands were shaking. Full magazine, Sarge. But I've never... I know, Jordan. The young soldier looked back down at his radio. His lips moved silently. Maybe prayer. Maybe just fear given voice and shapes his mouth could manage. Garrett checked his own rifle. 20 rounds. That was it. 20 rounds against 40 fighters who had them surrounded, outgunned, and marked for death. He pulled the emergency beacon from his vest pocket. 3 ounces of composite plastic and electronics. 1 button. 1 purpose. In 12 years of service, he'd never pressed it. The beacon was a talisman of failure. The thing you use when everything else had gone wrong, when you'd exhausted every option, when death wasn't just likely, but certain. Everything had gone wrong. Megan, he said, then caught himself. Sarah. She looked up. Her hands were dark with Dylan's blood. I'm going to activate the beacon. She didn't flinch, didn't argue, didn't offer false hope about reinforcements that were 60 miles away or air support that couldn't fly in this weather. She just nodded. Do it. Anyone got a better idea? Garrett asked the team. Silence. 3 seconds of it. The only sounds were Troy's machine gun, the crack of incoming fire, and Dylan's shallow, rapid breathing. The breathing of a young man bleeding to death on a mountain. Nate spoke through gritted teeth. Press the damn button, Garrett. He pressed it. The device vibrated once. A brief, almost imperceptible tremor, then went still. No light, no sound, no confirmation beyond that single pulse. Somewhere in orbit, satellites were receiving the signal, bouncing it through encrypted channels, screaming into the void that 6 Americans were dying and needed help. Help that wouldn't arrive in time. His radio crackled. Viper Actual, this is base. We receive your beacon. QRF is scrambling. ETA 90 minutes minimum. 90 minutes. Garrett set the beacon on the ground, picked up his rifle, chambered a round he couldn't afford to waste. Then we make them earn it, he said. Every single one of us. Troy nodded without looking back. Nate chambered a round in his pistol. Jordan positioned his weapon with shaking hands. Sarah pressed harder on Dylan's wound with one hand and drew her sidearm with the other. And the enemy kept coming. The next 4 minutes were the longest of Garrett Blackwood's life. The mortar rounds found their range. The third impact hit the southern lip of the depression. The explosion came with a pressure wave that made his ears pop and his vision blur. Rock fragments the size of fists rained down. Sarah threw herself over Dylan's body. Garrett pressed flat against stone, tasting blood and granite dust. When he looked up, part of the southern wall was gone. Just gone, reduced to rubble and smoke. Nate, he called. I'm fine. But Nate wasn't fine. His already broken arm had slammed into the ground when he dove for cover. The lance corporal screamed, a raw sound torn from somewhere deeper than pain. Then he bit down on his own sleeve to silence himself. An enemy drone buzzed overhead, a small quadcopter with a thermal camera mounted underneath. It circled lazily, feeding their exact position to whoever was calling the shots. making them visible in the fog, turning them from soldiers into targets. Troy tracked it with his machine gun, fired a burst, missed. The drone dipped, circled, and returned to its orbit. "Forget the drone," Garrett ordered. "Focus on ground threats." "They're pushing the western approach," Sarah called. She'd moved to the edge of the depression, peering through her scope with a calm focus that made her the best shot on the team. "I count 20. Moving in tactical line. Professional spacing." Professional. That was the word that made Garrett's blood run cold. These weren't local fighters with rusty AKs and rage. These were trained soldiers. Real equipment, real discipline, real tactics. "Troy, shift fire west." The M240 swung. Troy opened up. Brass casings flew in bright arcs. Tracers drew lines through the fog like laser pointers at a concert. The advancing line faltered. 2 men dropped. The rest scattered into cover. But it was a feint. "East!" Jordan screamed. "They're coming up the east side." Garrett spun. Through the fog, shapes materialized. Dark figures moving fast, using rocks as stepping stones. Close. Too close. Maybe 50 meters. How had they gotten that close? He fired, saw a man stagger, fired again. Another shape dropped. But there were too many. They just kept coming, like water rising, inevitable. "Nate, cover east with me." Nate crawled to his side, pistol extended in his one working hand. His face was gray. Sweat poured down his temples despite the cold. 15 rounds, he said. "That's all I got. Make them count." They fired together, slow, deliberate. Every round aimed, every trigger pull a decision. An enemy soldier appeared 20 meters away, rifle leveled. Garrett shot him center mass. Another appeared to his left. Nate dropped him with 2 quick rounds. But for every one that fell, 2 more appeared. A burst of automatic fire stitched across the wall, inches from Garrett's head. Rock fragments slashed his cheek, his neck. Blood ran warm down his collar. He didn't wipe it, didn't have time. "Grenade!" Sarah's voice cut through everything. Garrett saw it, a dark shape arcing through the fog, bouncing once against rock 3 feet from where Sarah crouched over Dylan's body, rolling slowly, almost gently, coming to rest against Dylan's leg. 2 seconds to detonation. Time did what it always does in moments like this. It stretched, broke apart into individual frames, each one sharp enough to cut. Sarah looked at the grenade, looked at Dylan beneath her, looked at Garrett, and threw herself over Dylan Mitchell's body. The explosion was white light and sound and pressure, a fist that punched up from the earth. Garrett saw Sarah lift into the air, saw her body go loose like a doll, saw her slam into the wall and slide down, leaving a dark smear on granite. "Sarah!" He was crawling before his mind processed what happened, crawling through dust and smoke and the acrid chemical smell of detonated explosive. He reached her, rolled her over. Her eyes were open, blinking, alive. "Sarah, talk to me." "Can't feel my leg." Her voice was small, distant, like she was speaking from the bottom of a well. "Left leg, can't feel it." Garrett looked. The shrapnel had shredded her left thigh, torn through muscle. Below the knee, her leg was a mess of blood and fabric and exposed tissue. Without surgery, within the hour, she'd lose the leg, maybe her life. He ripped open the medical kit, tourniquet on the left leg. Tight, tighter, she gasped, her back arched. He tied it off. Tourniquet on the right arm where more shrapnel had found her. Pressure bandage on the worst of the bleeding. "You're going to be fine, Sarah." Liar. She tried to smile, almost made it. Dylan Mitchell was still breathing beneath her, still unconscious, but alive. She'd saved him, caught the blast meant for both of them. "How is she?" Troy called without turning from his gun. "She needs a hospital." "Don't we all?" Troy's machine gun fell silent. He slapped the feed tray, pulled it open, empty. He reached for his last belt, 60 rounds, threaded it through with hands that moved from pure muscle memory. Last belt, Sarge. 60 rounds. Maybe 2 minutes of fire against an enemy that had already absorbed everything Viper Recon could throw at them, and still had the numbers to overwhelm them 10 times over. Garrett did the math. He'd been doing the math all night. It kept getting worse. 20 rounds in his rifle, Nate's 15 pistol rounds, Troy's last 60. Sarah couldn't shoot. Dylan was unconscious. Jordan had a full magazine but had never fired at a living person before. That was their entire arsenal against an enemy with drones, mortars, thermal imaging, and enough fighters to lose 3 for every one of theirs and still win. "Sir," Jordan looked up from the radio. His young face was streaked with tears he probably didn't know he was shedding. "I got a partial signal through. Headquarters received the beacon. QRF is scrambling. ETA? 90 minutes minimum." 90 minutes. Garrett closed his eyes. 1 second, 2. Let the numbers settle in his chest like a stone. They couldn't hold 90 minutes. They couldn't hold 9. The ammunition alone made it impossible. Even if every round found its target, they'd be empty in 3 minutes. After that, it would be knives and fists against rifles and grenades. He opened his eyes, looked at his team. Troy, feeding his last belt through with absolute focus. Nate, gray with pain, still gripping his pistol. Sarah, bleeding and broken, still conscious, still watching the approaches. Jordan, terrified but ready. Dylan, breathing but unreachable. This was where they would die. Garrett had made peace with his own death years ago, but watching his people die, his team, his family, that was the thing no one prepared you for. He picked up his rifle, checked the chamber, 1 round seated, 19 in the magazine. These would be the last 20 bullets of his military career. "Troy," he said. The big man glanced over. "When your belt runs dry, fall back to center. We'll hold together." "Copy that. Nate, you cover our left." "With pleasure." Nate's voice was barely a whisper. The pain was eating him alive, but his eyes were clear, focused, ready. "Jordan," the young soldier looked up. His lip was trembling. "You did good tonight. I need you to keep doing good." Jordan nodded, gripped his rifle, set his jaw. The enemy pushed again. All sides now. No more feints, no more probing. This was the final assault. Garrett could hear their commanders shouting orders in the fog, coordinating the kill. Troy opened up with his last belt. The M240 roared its defiance into the night. Brass flew, tracers streaked. The gun did what guns do, spoke the only language that matters when words stop working. Nate fired his pistol, methodical, 1 shot per target, 12 rounds left, 11, 10. Garrett aimed into the fog, squeezed trigger when shapes appeared. His world narrowed to the reticle, the trigger, the recoil. 18 rounds, 17, 16. It wasn't enough. It was never going to be enough. A mortar round hit the eastern wall. The concussion slammed Garrett into the ground. He tasted blood, felt something crack in his ribs. Rolled over, got back up, kept firing. 15 rounds. Troy's machine gun went silent. The belt was done. The big man dropped behind the wall, drew his rifle, joined the line without words, without hesitation. 20 rounds left for Garrett, 9 for Nate. A full magazine for Jordan that the young soldier was burning through too fast. Troy's rifle adding what it could. 8 rounds, 5. The fog swirled. Dark shapes pressed closer. 30 meters, 25. Garrett could hear them breathing now, hear boots scraping on rock, hear the metallic clicks of magazines being changed. 3 rounds. This was it. The end. Not with a bang, but with simple arithmetic. They would run out of bullets before the enemy ran out of people. Then from somewhere in the darkness to the north, a single rifle shot split the night. The sound was wrong, different, distant, precise, utterly out of place. Not the crack of a Kalashnikov, not the boom of a battle rifle. Something else, something Garrett had never heard before. On the western approach, an enemy fighter dropped. No warning, no cry. He simply folded forward and hit the ground like God had reached down and turned him off. His squad mates froze. A second shot, a second body. Garrett stopped breathing. A third shot from a different angle. A fourth, impossibly fast. The enemy advance stuttered, stumbled, collapsed into chaos. Soldiers who'd been seconds from overrunning their position scrambled backward, diving for cover, screaming orders that no one was following because the man giving orders had just become the fifth body to hit the ground. "Who the hell is shooting?" Troy whispered. Garrett raised his scope toward the northern ridge. Nothing. Just rocks, fog, darkness. But out there somewhere in that darkness, someone was hunting, and they weren't missing. 6 shots in 40 seconds. 6 bodies on the ground. Garrett counted them through his scope. His heart slammed against his cracked ribs. Each kill was surgical. 1 round, 1 target, no wasted motion. Whoever was out there wasn't spraying and praying. They were executing a masterclass in precision violence. "You seeing this, Troy?" "I'm seeing it." Troy pressed his eye tighter to his scope, scanning the northern ridge. "But I'm not seeing who." A pause. Thermal's picking up a single signature. North Ridge, high ground, small build, light frame. Troy pulled back from his scope, his face caught between awe and confusion. "Sarge," he said slowly, "I think it's a woman." Garrett didn't have time to process that. The enemy's Western assault team, 15 fighters who'd been moments from pouring over their wall, had reversed direction entirely. They were dragging their dead backward, stumbling over each other, firing blindly at a ridge they couldn't see through the fog. Another shot cracked from the north. Another body dropped. Nate let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "That's 7. She just dropped 7 guys in under a minute." "Save the admiration," Garrett said, but his voice carried no conviction. Because he was admiring it. They all were. 7 shots, 7 kills, 40 seconds. And whoever she wasn't done. 1,247 meters away, Captain Vesper Thorne adjusted her scope and fired her 8th shot. The enemy fighter on the eastern approach jerked sideways. Fell. She worked the bolt. The spent casing ejected. Glinted once in the fading light. Fell to stone. She'd been running for 3 hours and 12 minutes. Arrived on this ridge 60 seconds ago. Set up her rifle. Acquired targets. Started killing. No hesitation. No doubt. Just the work. Her father had taught her this. How to arrive at chaos and immediately impose order. How to read a battlefield in seconds. How to prioritize targets not by proximity but by function. Spotters first, then snipers, then heavy weapons, then command. Infantry last, because infantry without leadership was just frightened people with guns. She'd killed their spotter first, the man with binoculars on the southern cliff. He'd been directing mortar fire. Now the mortars had gone quiet. Second kill, their sniper. North Ridge. He'd been covering the assault teams. Now the assault teams had no overwatch. 3rd through 7th, command element. The men shouting orders, coordinating fire, making decisions. Now no one knew what to do. 8th, a heavy machine gunner setting up to suppress the depression where the American team was trapped. She worked the bolt again, scanned for the 9th target. The wind had shifted. 12 miles per hour, right to left. Temperature 41 degrees. Altitude 7,800 feet. Her range to target varied between 900 and 1,400 meters, depending on which approach she was engaging. Every shot required different calculations, different adjustments, different holds. But the mathematics were simple. They were always simple. Wind drift, bullet drop, Coriolis effect at range, spin drift, air density, temperature, barometric pressure. Variables that would overwhelm someone thinking about them consciously. But Vesper wasn't thinking. She was calculating. And there was a difference. Thinking was conscious, slow, prone to error. Calculating was muscle memory. 10,000 hours of practice compressed into instinct. Her body knew the corrections before her mind could articulate them. She saw target number 9, a radio operator, calling for reinforcements probably. He was crouched behind a boulder, only his head and shoulders visible. 1,112 meters, moderate wind, difficult but manageable. She adjusted elevation, held 2 MOA left for wind, let her breath settle into the natural pause between exhale and inhale. The moment when her body was most still, squeezed the trigger. The rifle punched back into her shoulder. Already sore from 49 previous shots over 3 days, the bruise under her skin was deep, purple, bleeding in places. By the time this was over, her rotator cuff would need surgery. Small price. The radio operator dropped. Vesper worked the bolt, scanned. Target 10. Below her, she could hear the enemy radio chatter. They were speaking Pashto. She understood enough. Ghost sniper. Unknown position. How many shooters? Just one. It's impossible. The ghost that eats bullets. That phrase made her smile. Barely. Brief. But it was there. The ghost that eats bullets. Her father would have liked that. She found target 11, prepared to fire, then felt the bullet impact 2 feet to her right. Rock chips exploded, stung her face. She dropped flat instantly. Years of training overriding conscious thought. Someone was shooting back. She'd been spotted. Counter sniper. The word formed in Vesper's mind like ice crystallizing. She pressed herself against the granite, making her body as small as the stone would allow. Her breath came controlled, steady, the way her father had taught her. When someone's hunting you, Vesper girl, panic is the killer, not the bullet. Panic makes you move when you should stay still, makes you stay still when you should move. Breathe through it, think through it, outlast it. She was pinned. The counter sniper had her position. He'd wait for her to move, to shift, to expose any part of herself. Then he'd take the shot. Professional, patient, exactly what she would do. Another bullet cracked past, this one closer, 6 inches from her head. Rock dust stung her eyes. He was adjusting, getting the range. The next one would find her. Vesper's mind calculated without her asking it to. The shot had come from south-southeast. The angle was slightly elevated, maybe 10 degrees. Distance felt like 1,800 to 2,000 meters based on the time lag between muzzle flash, which she'd missed, and the crack of the sonic boom. Long shot, very long, beyond most rifles' effective range, which meant he was good, very good, and he had quality equipment. She had maybe 90 seconds before he dialed her in completely. The enemy assault teams below had stopped advancing. They'd heard the counter-sniper engage. They were waiting to see if their sniper would kill the ghost before they pressed forward again. Smart tactics. Why risk bodies when your specialist might solve the problem for you? Vesper's right hand moved slowly, glacially, toward a rock the size of her fist, 3 feet to her right. Her fingers closed around it. Cold granite, sharp edges. She waited, counted her heartbeats. 64 per minute, elevated but controlled. She threw the rock hard. It sailed 10 feet to her left, struck another boulder, ricocheted with a sharp crack that echoed off the cliffs. The counter-sniper fired instantly. The bullet hit the false position, exactly where a person would be if they'd moved left for a better angle. He'd taken the bait. Vesper saw his muzzle flash, south cliff, behind a cluster of boulders. 1,912 meters. She knew this because she'd memorized this terrain during her 3-hour run, had marked every position, every hide site, every natural sniper nest. He was in position Charlie 7. She'd noted it 90 minutes ago. Good visibility, good cover, good escape route. Also predictable. She had 2 seconds before he realized his mistake. 2 seconds before he shifted back behind full cover. Vesper rose to a knee, brought her rifle up, found him in her scope. There, 1,912 meters, wind 14 miles per hour, gusting. He was partly obscured by the boulder, only his head and right shoulder visible as he worked his bolt. The math flooded through her nervous system like electricity. Range, 1,912 meters. Bullet drop, 487 inches. 40.5 feet, the height of a 4-story building. Her bullet would arc like a rainbow to reach him. Wind, 14 miles per hour quartering from right to left. At this range, that would push the bullet 22 inches left. But the wind was gusting. Every 18 seconds, it kicked up to 18 miles per hour for 3 seconds, then dropped back to 12. She had to fire during the lull. Coriolis effect. At this range and latitude, the Earth's rotation would deflect the bullet 2.3 minutes of angle right. Spin drift. Her barrel had right-hand rifling. The bullet would spin right, causing drift. 1.6 MOA right at this distance. Temperature, 41 degrees. Cold, dense air. Slower bullet velocity. She needed to compensate. Altitude, 7,800 feet. Thin air, less drag. Faster velocity. Contradictory to temperature. The two effects partially canceled each other, but not completely. Net elevation, plus 142 minutes of angle. Net windage, 18 inches left for wind, 6 inches right for Coriolis in spin drift, 12 inches net left, and the target was moving. Working his bolt, getting ready to fire again, getting ready to kill her. Time of flight, 2.9 seconds. She had 1.5 seconds before he would duck behind full cover. She counted the wind gusts in her head. The pattern had been consistent. Gust at 0 seconds, 8 seconds, 16 seconds. Lull at 3, 11, 19. She'd last heard a gust 6 seconds ago. 2 more seconds. Her finger rested on the trigger. 3.8 pounds of pressure. She'd know when it broke. She always knew. 1 second. The wind dropped. She felt it on her face. 12 miles per hour. The smell of stone and cold air and her own sweat. Her world contracted to the reticle. The trigger. The breath. She fired. The rifle slammed back. Her shoulder screamed. The bruise that had been building for 73 days tore deeper. She tasted copper. Adrenaline or blood, she couldn't tell. Didn't matter. 2.9 seconds. She watched through her scope. Didn't blink. Didn't breathe. The bullet traveled at 2,800 feet per second, climbing, arcing, fighting gravity and wind in the spin of the Earth itself. At 1 second, it reached its apex, 40 feet above the barrel, high enough to clear a house. At 2 seconds, it began to fall, accelerating back toward Earth. At 2.9 seconds, it arrived. The counter-sniper's head snapped back. His body went loose. He fell from his position, tumbling down the cliff face. She watched him fall 200 feet, watched him hit the rocks below. The sound reached her 3 seconds later, a wet thud that echoed once and died, dead before he hit the ground. Vesper was already moving, rolling right, coming to her feet, sprinting 20 yards to a new position. Her legs burned, her lungs screamed. Her shoulder felt like someone had driven a railroad spike through it. By the time the enemy fighters processed what happened, their sniper killed, the ghost still alive. She was 400 meters from where she'd fired. She dropped behind a new boulder, set up her rifle, hands moving from pure muscle memory. Acquire sight picture, check wind, breathe. Target 12. The enemy radio traffic exploded into chaos. She could hear it even without her radio. Voices screaming across the valley. She killed him. How? That's impossible. Where is she? She moved. How did she move? Panic. Beautiful, devastating panic. The kind that made soldiers stop thinking tactically and start thinking about survival. About going home. about anything except staying and dying on this mountain. Vesper fired. Target 12 dropped. An enemy fighter who'd been trying to coordinate the Eastern assault team. He fell without a sound. Worked the bolt. The spent casing ejected. Brass glinting once in the fading light before disappearing into shadow. Target 13. A machine gunner setting up on the western approach. 500 meters. Crosswind. Moving target. Lead 4 feet. Hold for wind. Fire. He fell. Bolt. Acquire. Fire. Target 14. Below in the depression she could hear the American team. Their voices carried in the cold air. Exhaustion and wonder mixed together. She won the duel in 20 seconds and relocated. Who is she? Good question. She didn't have time to answer it. Target 14 went down, then 15, then 16. The enemy assault broke completely. Professional soldiers became frightened men. They'd signed up to fight Americans. They hadn't signed up to fight a ghost who killed from positions they couldn't see at ranges they couldn't match. They retreated, dragging their dead when they could, leaving them when they couldn't, running south through the gorge, back toward whatever base camp they'd come from. Vesper let them go. For now, she had different priorities. She scanned the battlefield through her scope, counted bodies, 26 enemy confirmed killed, maybe more she couldn't see through the fog. 3 assault teams scattered, command structure destroyed, mortar teams silent, sniper eliminated. The immediate threat was neutralized, but then she heard it. Diesel engines, low and grinding, the sound of heavy vehicles climbing mountain roads, the sound of a problem that bullets couldn't solve. Reinforcements. She switched her radio to the American team's frequency, listened. Contact South Valley. I can see headlights. 2. No, 3 vehicles. That was the big man, Troy, the one with the M240. Lead vehicle is technical with mounted gun. Second and third are APCs, armored personnel carriers. 8-wheeled Soviet-era designs. Lightly armored but effective against small arms. Carried troops. Mounted machine guns. Behind them, a pause. She could hear the dread in his voice even from 1,200 meters away. BTR-80. Cannon traversed forward. They're coming straight up the main road. BTR-80. The nightmare. 14.5 millimeter autocannon. Thermal imaging. Enough armor to laugh at rifle fire. It could reduce their granite depression to rubble in 30 seconds. How long? That was Garrett, the team leader, calm despite everything. 10 minutes to weapons range, maybe less. Vesper looked at her rifle. M110 SASS, 300 Winchester Magnum. Excellent for anti-personnel work. Useless against armor plate. You couldn't kill a BTR with a rifle. But her father had taught her something about impossible problems. Armor is a shell, Vesper girl, hard on the outside, but inside, still just men, still just fuel, still just systems that can break. Don't fight the armor, fight what makes the armor work. She scanned the road with her spotting scope, saw the convoy climbing, saw the technical in the lead, saw the APCs behind it, saw the BTR grinding along in the rear, heavy, confident, unstoppable, and she formed a plan. The technical came first, an open-bed truck with a .50 caliber machine gun mounted in the back. The gunner stood tall behind the gun, scanning for targets, confident, exposed. The driver concentrated on the rough road, 1,200 meters away, still beyond effective range for the .50 caliber, well within range for her. The technical rounded a curve, exposed, no cover, just open road. Vesper calculated, but differently this time, faster. Her body knew the corrections before her mind could articulate them. 10,000 hours compressed into instinct. Range, 1,247 meters. Wind, 12 miles per hour. Stable. Temperature, 40 degrees, dropping as night deepened. The target was moving. The truck traveled maybe 28 miles per hour, 41 feet per second. Her time of flight would be 1.8 seconds. The road curved 18 degrees right in the next second and a half. She didn't run the geometry consciously. Her hands adjusted the scope. Her body knew. Fire 70 feet ahead, 2 feet right of center line. The truck would drive into the bullet's path. She settled her breathing, let her heart slow. Optimal. Her finger found the trigger, the familiar pressure. 3.8 pounds between her and the target. Fired. 1.8 seconds of silence, of waiting, of faith in mathematics and muscle memory and 10,000 hours of practice. The driver's head snapped sideways. The truck swerved violently, left, off the road, bounced over rocks, slammed into a boulder and stopped. The impact echoed across the valley like a bell. The gunner in the back flew forward, hit the cab, went limp. His body draped over the 50 cal like a discarded coat. 2 shots, 2 kills, 1 vehicle neutralized. The APCs accelerated. Their commanders had seen the technical die. They were buttoning up, hatches closing, trying to push through the kill zone on speed and armor. Smart. But armor had weaknesses, always did. She scanned the lead APC through her scope, found what she was looking for almost immediately. External fuel tank, bolted to the right rear quarter panel. Standard modification for extended operations in mountainous terrain. Extra diesel for the long hauls. Extra range. Also, extra vulnerability. The tank was auxiliary, thin steel, maybe half an inch thick, designed to hold fuel, not stop bullets. Range, 1,034 meters. Target size, 9 inches by 15 inches. Small, very small, like shooting a shoebox at half a mile. Wind, 12 miles per hour steady. The APC was moving, 25 miles per hour, 37 feet per second. The tank would be in a slightly different position by the time her bullet arrived. Lead required, 51 feet. She aimed, not at where the tank was, at where it would be in 1.4 seconds, at empty air, at possibility. Fired. The rifle barked, the bullet flew, invisible, inevitable. 1.4 seconds later, diesel sprayed across the APC's engine compartment. Black smoke erupted. The vehicle lurched like a wounded animal. Slowed. Stopped. The engine died with a cough that sounded almost human. The rear hatch blew open. Crew members stumbled out, coughing, trying to escape the smoke that filled their lungs. Vesper fired twice more. 2 crew members fell before they understood what was happening. The others scattered into rocks, disappeared into darkness. The second APC saw this. Its commander made the smart choice. Hatches sealed, full button-up, accelerated past the burning wreck, pushed through the kill zone at maximum speed, disappeared around a bend. Smart. He'd live. And the BTR kept coming. Vesper studied it through her scope. The beast, 8 wheels, sloped armor, turret rotating slowly, scanning for targets it couldn't see. The commander stood in the open hatch, binoculars raised, directing, confident, safe behind 14 millimeters of hardened steel. He thought he was untouchable. He was almost right. She couldn't penetrate the armor. Not with this rifle. Not with this ammunition. The BTR's hull was designed to laugh at rifle rounds. Her bullet might scratch the paint, might leave a mark, but it wouldn't penetrate. But the commander was flesh. The problem, the hatch was partially covered by the turret. Only a small window was visible, maybe 22 inches by 16 inches. The opening through which the commander could see and direct. A narrow gap. A difficult shot even under perfect conditions. From her current angle, she couldn't make it. The turret blocked the shot completely. She needed a higher position. A steeper downward angle so the bullet would come down into the hatch instead of trying to thread through the narrow window at a flat trajectory. She checked the terrain, found what she needed. A peak 800 feet higher, to the northwest. steep, nearly vertical in places. 15 minutes of climbing for a normal person. She had 4 minutes before the BTR reached weapons range of the American team. Vesper slung her rifle, started climbing. 68 pounds of gear, injured shoulder that screamed with each pull-up. Adrenaline wearing off, exhaustion setting in like fog. 3 hours of running, followed by 51 shots fired, followed by a sniper duel, followed by this. Her body was screaming, begging her to stop, to rest, to acknowledge that she was human and humans had limits. She ignored it. Pain is just information, Vesper girl. Your body telling you it wants to stop. You don't have to listen. Pain is temporary. Failure is permanent. Hand over hand, boot wedged in crack. Push up, reach, grab, climb. The stone was cold against her palms. Her fingers cramped. Her legs shook. 4 minutes became 3. She climbed faster. 3 became 2. Her lungs burned. Each breath tasted like copper and exhaustion. Her shoulder felt like someone was driving a spike through it with each pull-up. The rotator cuff was tearing. She could feel it, small fibers snapping like guitar strings pulled too tight. She climbed faster. 1 minute left. She reached the peak, dropped behind a boulder, set up her rifle. Her hands were shaking. She forced them still, willed them steady through pure discipline. The BTR was 1,200 meters away now. Closer. The commander still stood in the hatch, still scanning with binoculars, still confident, still safe, still wrong. Below, she could hear the American team preparing for the worst. We can't fight that thing. Maybe she can. Maybe. Maybe not. But she would try. New range, 1,689 meters. Slightly farther due to the additional height. Angle, 28 degrees downward. Steep, very steep. The bullet would arc up, then plunge down into the hatch like a falcon diving. Wind at this height, 16 miles per hour. Swirling. Valley thermals made it unpredictable. She could feel it on her face, taste it. Cold air rising from the valley floor. Warm air descending from the peaks. Turbulence. Temperature, 38 degrees. This was beyond normal engagement parameters. Downward angle, this steep changed everything. Gravity became an assist instead of an enemy. Bullet drop was reduced, but wind was worse at height, unpredictable. And the thermal currents created invisible rivers of air that could push a bullet off course without warning. She watched the wind patterns, the way grass moved on distant slopes, the way dust lifted and fell. There was a rhythm, always was. Nature didn't do random, it did patterns. Gust from west, settle. Gust from north, settle. 3-second lulls every 14 seconds. She counted, 14, 13, 12. The commander raised his binoculars, looking at something. The American position probably, directing his driver, giving orders to soldiers who would die following them. 10, 9, 8. Vesper's crosshair settled on his head. A small target, 19 inches wide at 1,689 meters, through swirling wind, at a steep angle. With a shoulder that was barely functional. Impossible. The rifle doesn't know what's impossible, Vesper girl. Only you do. Stop knowing. Start believing. 4, 3, 2. The wind dropped. She felt it. 12 miles per hour. Steady. The lull. 1. Her world became the reticle, the trigger, the breath. Nothing else existed. Not the pain, not the exhaustion, not the impossibility. Just the shot. She fired. The bullet climbed, arced. The downward angle meant it peaked early, 20 feet above the barrel. Then it fell, plunging like a stone dropped from heaven. 3.1 seconds of flight time, 3.1 seconds of perfect ballistics and wind compensation and gravity assistance. The commander jerked, his body pitched forward, caught on the hatch rim, arms dangling inside, blocking the hatch from closing. His binoculars fell, tumbled down the side of the BTR, hit the road, shattered, dead. The BTR stopped. Just stopped. No commands from above. No eyes to direct the crew inside. The cannon traversed on its last programmed arc, pointing at nothing, searching for targets that didn't exist. Vesper watched through her scope. The dismounted infantry, maybe 15 men who'd been using the vehicles as cover, stood confused, looking at the BTR, looking at the ridge where she'd fired from, looking at each other. Their armor was dead. Their commander was dead. Their assault plan was shattered. They'd come to kill 6 Americans, and instead they were standing in a graveyard created by one woman they couldn't see. One by one, they broke. Not all at once, but like ice cracking. One man would take a step backward, then another. Then they were all retreating, running south, back the way they'd come, back to safety, back to anywhere that wasn't this mountain of death. She let them go. She'd killed enough for one night. Vesper slumped against the boulder. Her shoulder was on fire, not metaphorically, actually on fire. She'd felt the rotator cuff tear completely on that last shot, the one that killed the BTR commander. Something deep inside had given way, snapped like a rubber band pulled too tight for too long. She could barely move her right arm now. Just lifting the rifle would be agony. Firing it might be impossible. 52 shots. That's what it had taken. 52 shots to destroy an enemy force, stop an armor column, and save 6 American soldiers she'd never met. Her father would have done it in 30. But her father was dead, and she was alive. And so were those 6 soldiers in the depression 1,200 meters below. That would have to be enough. She heard new sounds now. Different engines, lighter, higher pitched, the distinctive whop, whop, whop of rotor blades cutting cold mountain air. Helicopters. The QRF had finally arrived. She checked her watch. 92 minutes since the beacon was activated. Close. Very close. Those soldiers had come within minutes of dying, within bullets, within heartbeats, but they hadn't died. She listened to their radio traffic. Reaper 16, this is Viper Recon. Threat neutralized. LZ is clear. You are cleared to land. Copy, Viper. Inbound. 60 seconds, good work down there. They didn't know it wasn't their work. Not yet. They would soon. Vesper's job was done. She could disappear back into the mountains, continue her hunt for the convoy, try to salvage something from 73 days of work that she'd abandoned to run 18 miles for strangers. But then she thought about her father, dying on a ridge while wondering if anyone was coming, wondering if anyone had heard his call, wondering if he mattered enough for someone to risk everything. These soldiers had heard someone coming, but they didn't know who. They didn't know that anyone had answered their call. For all they knew, the enemy had simply retreated by chance, by luck, by the randomness of war. She wouldn't let them wonder. You're not late this time, Vesper girl. You're here. Now let them see you. Let them know someone heard, someone came, someone cared enough to run 18 miles and fire 52 shots and tear their shoulder apart for 6 strangers. Vesper stood. Her legs protested, cramped, exhausted. Her shoulder screamed. She ignored all of it. Started down the mountain, toward the depression, toward the 6 soldiers she'd saved, toward the moment when the ghost would become real. Time to let them see. The descent took 22 minutes. Steep terrain, loose rock, injured shoulder that made balance difficult. Every step was a negotiation between gravity and will, between pain and purpose. By the time she reached the base, the helicopters were landing in the flat area below the depression. Rotor wash blasted the fog aside. Medics were already moving. She approached from the north, emerged from the fog 20 meters from their position. 6 soldiers, 5 standing, 1 on a stretcher being loaded. They saw her. Staff Sergeant Garrett Blackwood stood at the front, 34 years old, 12 years of experience written in his face like scars. He was bleeding from a dozen cuts, favoring his left side where ribs were probably cracked, but he was on his feet. His rifle was in his hands. His eyes were clear. He saw her and straightened. Vesper stopped, 20 meters away, close enough to talk, far enough to maintain tactical spacing. Old habits died hard. Never died at all, really. Viper Recon, she said, not a question, a statement. She knew who they were, had been listening to their radio traffic for 90 minutes. That's us, Garrett said. His voice was hoarse, exhausted, but steady. For the last time, that's us. She studied them, taking pride. Step, you assess. His were shaking. Hers weren't. Give the coagulant to your corporal. Now. It'll buy her 30 minutes. The antibiotics are for your private. Clotting accelerator is in the green package. Troy moved to Sarah, started applying the coagulant. Sarah flinched when the powder hit her wound, chemical burn mixing with everything else. Then she let out a long breath as it began working, as the bleeding slowed, as life stopped pouring out of her. That's good stuff, Troy said. He looked, just trying to understand. The shrapnel missed his liver, penetrated bowel probably, but liver is intact. You can tell by the bleeding pattern, dark but not black, fast but not arterial. Pressure is holding. He's stable enough for transport. Troy stared at her. How many gut wounds have you seen? 73 confirmed. Another 40 probably. You learn to recognize the difference. The number hung in the air. 73. That meant 73 people she'd shot in the abdomen. Watch. The word was final. Absolute. Like a door closing. Like a book slamming shut. I have my own mission to complete. What mission? Garrett asked. Vesper was quiet for a long moment, looking at them, at 6 soldiers who'd almost died, who'd pressed a button and hoped someone was listening, who'd held their ground against impossible odds because giving up wasn't an option. Then, I was tracking a weapons convoy, 73 days of surveillance, 20 trucks, heavy weapons, headed up the Ironhawk Thorn, the legend, 200 confirmed, 204, Desert Storm, Somalia, Afghanistan. He was my teacher before he was a legend. Everything I know he taught me, every shot, every calculation, every principle. She paused, looking at the mountain, at the darkness, at the place where her father's ghost lived. He taught me that being the best shot doesn't matter if you're shooting at the wrong things. That skill without purpose is just noise. That the only metric that matters is, did you save someone who needed saving? The helicopters were closer now, maybe 2 minutes out. The sound of rotors growing louder. The sound of rescue, of survival, of going home. Vesper turned to leave. At least tell us how to find you, Garrett said. Desperate, wanting to repay debt that could never be repaid. How to thank you properly, how to... You can't, that's the point. Then how do we thank you? Vesper stopped, didn't turn around. Her voice carried over her shoulder, still quiet, still controlled, but something warmer underneath now, something human breaking through the operator's mask. You're alive, that's all the thanks I need. She started walking, 2 steps, 3. Captain Thorne! She turned, looked at Garrett, really looked, saw past the sergeant to the man, the leader who'd kept his team together when everything said they should break, who'd made impossible decisions in impossible circumstances, who'd pressed a beacon and hoped. Your father would be proud, Vesper smiled, just for 2 seconds. A small, quiet expression that changed her entire face, softened the hard angles, warmed the pale blue eyes, revealed the woman behind the operator, the daughter behind the soldier. I hope so, Sergeant. I really hope so. She walked into the fog. 10 steps, 20, the mountain swallowed her, like she'd never been there, like she'd been nothing more than a ghost story told around fires, a legend that couldn't possibly be true. Except 6 soldiers had seen her, had watched her walk away, had the medical kit in their hands, had the proof. Garrett stood watching the empty space where she'd been. "Did that just happen?" Jordan whispered. "Yeah," Garrett said. He looked down at the medical kit in his hands, at the coagulant that was saving Sarah's leg, at the antibiotics that would keep Dylan alive until surgery. Physical proof of something impossible. It happened. The helicopters landed. Rotor wash blasted the fog aside. Medics swarmed Sarah and Dylan. Stretchers materialized. IVs went in. Professional efficiency, life-saving machinery in motion. But Garrett kept looking north, at the ridge where she disappeared, at the darkness that had swallowed her. Somewhere up there, a woman with pale blue eyes and 52 confirmed kills in 90 minutes was climbing back into the darkness, returning to a mission she'd abandoned to save 6 strangers, returning to work that would never appear in any report, to a war that had no witnesses, to a life lived in the spaces between what governments acknowledged and what actually happened when someone pressed a button and hoped. And he would never see her again. But he would remember. They all would, for the rest of their lives. Because some people change your world in 90 minutes and disappear before you can say the words that matter. The words he should have said. "Thank you for not being late. Thank you for hearing us. Thank you for running 18 miles when you could have stayed safe. Thank you for giving up 73 days of work. Thank you for 52 shots that saved 6 lives. Thank you for being someone who answers when strangers call for help." But she was already gone. And maybe she didn't need to hear those words. Maybe she already knew. The rotor wash faded, the helicopters lifted, carrying wounded soldiers toward hospitals and surgery and life. 6 people who'd been dead 90 minutes ago. 6 people who'd been given another chance because someone decided that a beacon call mattered more than a mission. That lives in front of you mattered more than objectives on a map. The mountain returned to silence. Just wind, just stone, just the memory of shots fired in darkness. And somewhere in that darkness, a ghost named Wren was already moving, already calculating, already preparing for the next impossible thing. Because that's what ghosts do. They haunt the places where people die, and they make sure those people don't die after all. 3 days felt like 3 years. Staff Sergeant Garrett Blackwood sat in a windowless room at Forward Operating Base Iron Ridge, his cracked ribs wrapped tight beneath his uniform, his face stitched in 4 places where rock fragments had opened the skin. His hands rested on the metal table in front of him. They still carried a faint tremor, the kind that comes from sustained adrenaline, followed by the crash, the kind that takes weeks to fade. Across from him sat a colonel he'd never met. Silver hair, sharp eyes, the patient expression of a man who'd spent 25 years separating lies from truth, fear from fact, reality from the stories people told themselves to make sense of chaos. Colonel David Morrison, Pentagon liaison, Vesper's commanding officer, though Garrett didn't know that yet. "Your after-action report is unusual, Sergeant Blackwood." "Yes, sir." Morrison tapped the tablet in front of him. "You claim that a single, unidentified operator eliminated approximately 28 hostile combatants, disabled 3 armored vehicles, won a counter-sniper engagement at extreme range, neutralized an anti-air position, and then disappeared without debriefing." "That is correct, sir." And this individual identified herself only as Captain Vesper Thorne, call sign Wren. "Yes, sir." The colonel set down the tablet, leaned back, studied Garrett the way a surgeon studies an X-ray, looking for what's broken beneath the surface. "There is no operator with that name or call sign in any unit assigned to this theater, Sergeant. We've checked with JSOC, SOCOM, every Special Operations Command within 3,000 miles, CIA Special Activities Division, even reached out to Allied forces, British SAS liaison, Australian SASR. Morrison paused. "Nobody has an operator matching your description conducting operations in the Hindu Kush region." Garrett said nothing. He'd expected this, known it was coming, prepared for it the moment Vesper had walked away into the fog. Your team has been interviewed separately, Morrison continued. Corporal Kincaid from her hospital bed, Specialist Brennan, Lance Corporal Callahan, Specialist Webb, even Private Mitchell, once he regained consciousness. Their accounts are identical, word for word, detail for detail. The colonel stood, walked to the far wall. His boots echoed in the empty room. Which means either you all experienced the same hallucination brought on by combat stress, or you coordinated a story, or, he turned, you're telling the truth. Garrett met his eyes. We're telling the truth, sir. Then explain to me how one person, operating alone, without support, without coordination with friendly forces, managed to produce this kind of result. Morrison gestured at the tablet. 28 confirmed enemy KIA. 3 armored vehicles destroyed or disabled. Command structure eliminated. Assault teams scattered. ABTR-80 commander killed from a position that required climbing 800 vertical feet in 4 minutes while injured. A counter-sniper engagement won at 1,900 meters in high wind. He leaned forward, hands flat on the table. The mathematics don't work, Sergeant. Not for one person. Not in 90 minutes. Not in those conditions. Garrett thought about how to answer. How to make someone believe something they hadn't seen. How to describe precision that bordered on supernatural. Skill that defied conventional understanding. Sir, I can only tell you what I witnessed. Captain Thorne arrived on station and immediately began engaging targets. Her shot placement was surgical. 1 round per target. No misses that I could observe. She prioritized command elements first, then support weapons, then infantry. She moved positions after every 3 to 5 shots, made herself untraceable. Garrett paused, remembering. When enemy armor arrived, she didn't try to penetrate it. She went after weak points, fuel tanks, exposed crew. She eliminated the BTR commander from an elevated position that she'd climbed to specifically for that shot. Everything was calculated, deliberate, professional. And then she left. Yes, sir. She provided medical supplies, confirmed our casualties were stable, and departed to continue her own mission. Morrison returned to his seat. What mission? She said she'd been tracking a weapons convoy for 73 days, that she abandoned the surveillance to respond to our beacon. 73 days solo reconnaissance? That's what she said, sir. The colonel was quiet for a long moment. Then, is there anything else you want to add to your report, Sergeant Blackwood? Garrett thought of the medical kit. Tier 1 equipment, $300 a pack. The kind of gear that shouldn't exist outside black operations. He thought of Vesper's eyes, pale blue, impossibly calm. The eyes of someone who'd made peace with death long ago. He thought of her father, Ironhawk Thorne, a name that carried weight even 10 years after his death. He thought of the 2-second smile, the only moment when the operator had disappeared and the woman had shown through. No, sir, that's the complete account. Morrison stared at him. Garrett stared back. Neither man blinked. Finally, the colonel nodded. Here's what's going to happen, Sergeant. Your team is being awarded the Bronze Star for valor under fire. Your after-action report will be classified and refiled under a different operational designation. Officially, Viper Recon was extracted by helicopter after successfully evading a superior enemy force through tactical discipline and defensive positioning. He stood. No mention of Captain Thorne, no mention of external support, no mention of anything that happened on that mountain beyond what 6 soldiers could accomplish alone. Sir, that's not a request, Sergeant. That's how this works. Because the alternative creates questions that neither of us is authorized to answer. Garrett understood. Some truths were too large for official channels. Some people operated in the spaces between what governments acknowledged and what actually happened in the dark corners of the world, where missions had no names and operators had no records, and success was measured in lives saved that no one would ever know about. "One more thing," Morrison said. He reached into his jacket, pulled out a plain manila folder. No markings, no classification stamps, no return address. "This arrived this morning by courier. No origin documentation." The envelope said only, "For the team from Viper Recon." He slid it across the table. Garrett opened it. Inside was a single photograph. A woman standing on a mountain ridge at sunset, blonde hair catching the last light, rifle slung across her back, face turned slightly away from the camera, enough to see the line of her jaw, the set of her shoulders, not enough to identify her in a lineup. Below the image, handwritten in precise lettering, "Where others see only darkness, I see the path forward." No signature, no name, just those words in the image. Garrett's throat tightened. His eyes burned in a way that had nothing to do with the dust and smoke of 3 days ago. This was proof. Not for the file, not for the colonel, for them. For 6 soldiers who needed to know she was real. That the night on the mountain hadn't been fever dream or hallucination or the mind's desperate invention of hope where none existed. She'd sent proof, evidence, a gift. "Keep it or don't," Morrison said quietly, "but understand that officially she doesn't exist. This photograph proves nothing. Photographs never do in this business." "She exists, sir. This proves it." "Does it? I see a woman on a mountain. Could be anyone. Could be anywhere. Could be photoshopped." In the intelligence world, Sergeant, belief requires more than images. It requires documentation, witnesses, paper trails. Morrison moved toward the door, stopped, turned back. His expression had changed. The interrogator was gone. In his place was something older, something that looked like a man who'd carried his own secrets for too many years. "If she's real, and I'm not saying she is, then she chose to save your team at significant personal risk. She violated her mission parameters, compromised her own safety, did all of that for strangers." He paused. "In my experience, people who make that choice don't do it for medals or recognition. They do it because something inside them won't allow them to do otherwise. That kind of person deserves to be remembered, even if it's only by the people she saved." "We'll remember, sir, every day." Morrison nodded once, opened the door, left without another word. Garrett sat alone with the photograph, studied every detail. The way she stood, the rifle, the mountains behind her, the sunset, the words. "Where others see only darkness, I see the path forward." That was her, exactly her. Someone who saw solutions where others saw impossibility, who saw duty where others saw suicide, who saw 6 soldiers worth saving when command saw acceptable losses. He carefully placed the photograph back in the folder, stood. His ribs screamed. He ignored them. Walked through the base until he found the medical tent where his team was waiting. They'd gathered without being asked. Even Sarah in her wheelchair, left leg elevated, right arm in a sling. Even Dylan, who'd checked himself out of intensive care against every doctor's order. His side was bandaged, his movement stiff, but he was upright, present, breathing. Troy sat on a cot. Nate leaned against a support pole, his arm now in a proper cast. Jordan sat cross-legged on the floor, hands folded like he was praying. All of them breathing, all of them alive. Garrett pulled out the photograph, held it up without words. Nobody spoke. They didn't need to. Troy leaned forward, studying it with the intensity he brought to everything. Nate closed his eyes briefly, then opened them wet. Jordan reached out and touched the edge of the photo gently, as if it might dissolve. Sarah took it from Garrett's hands, held it in her lap, ran her thumb across the handwritten words at the bottom. "Where others see only darkness," she read aloud, voice soft, "I see the path forward." Dylan stared at the photograph. His eyes were bright with something between wonder and grief. "That's her. That's really her." "That's her," Garrett confirmed. "She told me nobody saved my life, Dylan said quietly. Told me Sarah saved my life. The grenade. But she saved all of us. And then told me to thank someone else. She was deflecting, Sarah said. That's what she does. Saves people and then disappears before anyone can say thank you. Who does that? Dylan asked. The question hung in the air. Genuine. Confused. The question of someone young trying to understand sacrifice without ego. She does, Troy said. That's exactly who she is. Garrett took the photograph back, held it so they could all see it one last time. Someone's going to ask us what happened on that mountain, someday, somewhere, at a bar, at a reunion, at a family dinner. They'll ask how Viper Recon survived against 40 fighters with no ammunition and no support. He looked at each of them. We tell them the official story: superior positioning, fire discipline, enemy mistakes. We tell them we were lucky and we were good and we held our ground. And the truth? Nate asked. The truth stays here, between us. 6 people and a photograph and a name that doesn't exist in any file. Jordan spoke quietly, almost reverently. Ren. They repeated it, all of them together. Ren. The name hung in the air like a prayer, like a promise, like a debt that could never be repaid but would always be carried. Garrett tucked the photograph into his jacket pocket. He'd carry it there for the next 14 years, through 2 more deployments, through promotion to master sergeant, through retirement, through marriage and fatherhood, and the long nights when the mountain came back to him in dreams. He'd carry it until the edges were soft, and the image was faded, and the handwriting was almost too faint to read. But he'd memorized the words the moment he first saw them. They were burned into memory deeper than any scar. Where others see only darkness, I see the path forward. The team stood together, 6 soldiers who shared a secret that would bind them for life. They'd scatter eventually, different units, different bases, different chapters of different stories. Troy would make sergeant major, lead his own platoon, retire after 25 years with a chest full of medals and a back full of shrapnel. He'd never speak about the night on the mountain, but he'd think about it every time he held a rifle, every time he made a long shot, every time the math said something was impossible and he did it anyway. Nate would leave the Army after his enlistment ended, open a woodworking shop in Vermont with one arm that never bent quite right. He'd build furniture, teach apprentices, live quiet. But every year on the anniversary, he'd set his tools down, look north toward distant mountains, and whisper thank you to someone who couldn't hear him. Jordan would become a communications officer, teach young soldiers how to keep trying the radio when every frequency was jammed, how to maintain discipline when chaos screamed, how faith sometimes looked like pressing a button and hoping someone was listening. He'd never tell them about the beacon, but he'd think about it every time someone called for help. Sarah would return to full duty after 18 months of physical therapy, lead her own recon team, retire as a first sergeant with 22 years of service. She'd never speak about throwing herself on a grenade, about waking up to find someone had saved them all while they lay bleeding. But she'd teach her teams about sacrifice without glory, about doing the right thing even when no one would ever know. Dylan would serve 3 more deployments, return home, marry, have a daughter, name her Grace, because Grace was what he'd been given on a mountain when he didn't deserve to die. He'd tell his daughter bedtime stories about heroes, about people who ran toward danger while others ran away. He'd never mention the mountain, but she'd see something in his eyes when he talked about heroes, something that looked like memory and gratitude and awe. And Garrett would carry the photograph in the debt and the knowledge that someone he'd never see again had fundamentally changed his understanding of what was possible, of what duty meant, of what one person could accomplish when every rule said it couldn't be done. They'd meet once a year, every year, same day, a restaurant in Montana, small place, good food, the kind of diner where truckers and ranchers ate breakfast at 4 in the morning. They'd order coffee and pie and sit at a table for 7. The 7th chair would always be empty. A glass of water always sat in front of it. Nobody would ask who the chair was for. They'd all know. In somewhere in mountains they'd never see, in operations they'd never hear about, in the quiet spaces between what governments admitted and what actually happened in the dark, a woman with blonde hair and pale blue eyes would be moving. Still watching, still calculating, still choosing to answer beacons that weren't meant for her. Still running toward danger because something inside her couldn't do otherwise. She would never sit in that chair, never taste the pie, never know that 6 people thought about her every single day. But she didn't need to know. Because the people who change your life most are rarely the ones who stay. They're the ones who appear in your darkest moment, do what no one else can, and disappear before you can say the words that matter. Vesper never needed their words. She'd already heard them in the beacon signal, in the way they'd held their ground, in the fact that 6 soldiers had refused to die on a mountain that wanted them dead. That was enough. That was always enough. But the story didn't end there, because 1,800 miles away, in mountains that didn't appear on tourist maps, Captain Vesper Thorn was finishing what she'd started. 3 days of tracking, 3 days of hunting, 3 days of surviving on 4 hours of sleep and freeze-dried rations, and the knowledge that 20 trucks carrying weapons had disappeared into Pakistan because she'd chosen 6 soldiers over a mission. 47 people had died in a village called Kandari. Women, children, elders. The militia had arrived with the weapons she'd been tracking, had demanded tribute, had killed everyone who resisted and half of those who didn't. 47 dead because she'd run 18 miles to save 6. The math didn't balance. But war never did. You made impossible choices and lived with them, or you didn't live at all. She'd found the convoy on the 3rd day, hidden in a valley that required 2 days of climbing to reach. 20 trucks, 60 militia fighters, more than had been there originally. They'd reinforced after hearing about the ambush. After hearing about the ghost who'd killed 28 of their people, they were ready for her now. Patrols, sentries, overlapping fields of fire. They'd turned the valley into a fortress. Vesper studied it from a ridge 2,000 meters away, counted trucks, counted men, counted her remaining ammunition. 83 rounds. Her shoulder was barely functional. 3 surgeries wouldn't be enough to fix the damage. The rotator cuff was torn completely. The bursa was shredded. Every shot now was agony. But pain was just information. She could still shoot. That's all that mattered. Her target wasn't the men. 60-1 odds. Even she had limits. Her target was the mission. Stop the weapons from reaching their destination. 4 trucks in the center carried diesel fuel for the others. If those trucks burned, the convoy couldn't move, couldn't deliver. Mission kill without killing all 60 fighters. She settled into position, set up her rifle, began the mathematics. For 72 hours, she waged a siege. 1 woman against 60. She didn't fight fair. She fought smart. Night 1, 12 shots, 4 fuel trucks and 8 drivers. All fuel trucks burning by midnight. The convoy immobile. The militia furious. 30 fighters spread out to search for her. She evaded, relocated, waited. Day 2, 8 shots, 8 hunters who'd gotten too close. The militia called for reinforcements, for helicopter support, for anything that could find the ghost. Night 2, she destroyed their communications equipment, 2 radio trucks burning. They couldn't coordinate with the helicopter gunship that arrived at dawn. Day 3, the militia commander stood in the open, directing operations, trying to salvage the mission, trying to move weapons on foot if necessary. He was 1,847 meters away, over a mile, beyond her rifle's rated maximum effective range, beyond what most snipers would even attempt. Vesper calculated anyway. Range, 1,847 meters. Wind, 18 miles per hour, variable. Swirling valley thermals, bullet drop, 487 inches, 40.5 feet, the height of a 4-story building. Temperature, 94 degrees Fahrenheit, hot, less dense air, faster bullet velocity but less predictable wind. Altitude, 8,400 feet, very thin air, reduced drag. Coriolis effect, 3.2 minutes of angle right. At this range, the Earth's rotation was a major factor. Spin drift, 2.1 MOA right. Barometric pressure, 21.8 inches of mercury, very low pressure. Combined adjustments, elevation plus 168 MOA, windage 8.4 MOA left after accounting for Coriolis and spin drift. Time of flight, 3.6 seconds. Target, 19 inches wide, a man's torso. This was beyond anything in the Marine Corps record books, beyond most confirmed kills in history, beyond reasonable. But her father had taught her something. The rifle doesn't know what's impossible, Vesper girl. Only you do. Stop knowing, start believing. She stopped knowing, started believing, set her breathing, 62 beats per minute, exhaled to the natural pause, the moment between breaths when the body was most still. Trigger press. 3.8 pounds, straight back, no jerk. The rifle slammed into her ruined shoulder. Something tore deeper. She ignored it. 3.6 seconds. She watched through her scope. Didn't blink, didn't breathe. The bullet climbed, 40 feet up, high enough to clear a small building. Then it fell, arcing down like artillery, like the fist of God reaching down through 3.6 seconds of flight time to deliver judgment. The militia commander jerked, stumbled, fell, center mass, through the heart, dead before he hit the ground. The militia collapsed, without fuel, without communications, without leadership. They abandoned the trucks, scattered into the mountains, ran for their lives. The weapons would rot in that valley, rust, become useless. They'd never reach their destination. Mission complete. Vesper collapsed behind her rifle, exhausted, injured beyond what field medicine could address, but alive and successful. Both missions finished. 6 soldiers saved, 47 dead avenged. Weapons stopped. The price? 73 days of her life. A shoulder that would never fully heal. 3.6 seconds of perfect execution at impossible range. Small price for the mathematics of duty. She closed her eyes, whispered to a ghost, "Dad, I finished it. Both missions. I wasn't late." A CIA extraction team found her 6 hours later. They'd been tracking the convoy too, had watched from satellite as one woman had accomplished what a team of 12 was supposed to do. They carried her out, treated her injuries, asked no questions. Operators like her didn't answer questions anyway. 3 days later, an envelope arrived at Forward Operating Base Iron Ridge, addressed to Viper Recon. Inside, 1 photograph and 1 sentence. The photograph traveled from Garrett to Troy to Nate to Jordan to Sarah to Dylan. Each of them held it. Each of them understood. She was real. She was alive. She was still out there. And someday, somewhere, someone else would press an emergency beacon, would call into the void, hoping someone was listening, would face impossible odds and pray for a miracle. And maybe, just maybe, they'd hear a rifle shot from darkness, would see an enemy fall without explanation, would survive because someone they'd never meet had decided that saving lives mattered more than staying safe. The legacy didn't belong to Vesper alone. It belonged to everyone who learned from her, who understood that excellence didn't need announcement, that duty sometimes meant running 18 miles when you could stay hidden, that one person could change everything if they were willing to pay the price. 18 months later, at Marine Corps Base Quantico, a new class of Scout sniper students filed into a classroom. 32 of them, 12 women, 20 men. The best of the best, selected from thousands of applicants. The instructor entered. The students stood. Captain Vesper Thorne walked to the front of the room, right arm in a slight sling. Permanent damage from 73 shots fired in 3 days. 3 surgeries hadn't fully repaired it. 4th surgery scheduled for next year. She'd never shoot at competition level again, but she could still teach. The students whispered, "That's her, the Hindu Kush ghost, the one who made the 1847-meter shot." Stories spread fast in the military, even classified stories, especially those. Vesper wrote on the board in precise lettering, "Patience isn't waiting, it's calculating." Sergeant James Iron Hawk Thorne, USMC. She turned to face them. "My father wrote that. Gunnery Sergeant James Thorne, killed in action, Afghanistan, 2014. 204 confirmed kills across 3 wars. He taught me everything I know about being a scout sniper." She paused, let that settle. "Not because I was talented, not because I was special, because I did the work. 12,000 hours of practice, 12,000 hours of calculations, 20,000 hours of making shots that matter." A student raised her hand, young, maybe 22, eager. "Ma'am, what makes a shot matter?" Vesper was quiet for a long moment, thinking about 6 soldiers in a depression, about 47 civilians in a village, about impossible choices made in darkness. "The shot that matters most," she said finally, "is the one that saves a life you can see. Not one you might save later, not one that advances your career, not the one that makes you famous, the one that saves a life. Right now, in front of you, when everyone says it's impossible." Another student, male, older, maybe prior service. "Ma'am, how do you live with the ones you can't save?" Vesper looked at him, really looked, saw the weight he was carrying, the guilt, the faces he saw when he closed his eyes. "You don't," she said quietly. "You carry them, every single one. They become part of your calculations. Every technique I teach you, every adjustment I share, every principle I pass on. It's so you'll be better prepared than I was. So maybe you won't face the same impossible choices. So maybe you'll find a way to save both when I only saved one." She moved to the window, looked out at the range where her father had taught her to shoot 20 years ago. "That's why we teach, so the next generation does better than we did, so they carry forward what we learned. So when they face darkness, they see the path forward, because someone before them walked it and left markers." The room was silent, 32 students absorbing the weight of what she'd said, understanding that becoming a scout sniper wasn't just about marksmanship. It was about carrying forward a legacy of precision and duty and sacrifice. "You want to be scout snipers?" Vesper asked. "Then understand this. The rifle is a tool. The mathematics is method. But the choice of which shot to take, that's character. That's what separates snipers from killers. Mission from murder. Legacy from loss." She turned back to face them. "My father chose to save his Marines. It cost his life. I chose to save 6 soldiers. It cost 47 civilians and 73 days of work, and a shoulder that will never fully heal. You will face impossible choices. The question isn't what can you hit? The question is what should you hit? And sometimes the answer is, I don't know, but I'll do my best and live with the consequences." The students nodded, some understanding immediately, others would understand later. After their first impossible choice, after their first time carrying a decision that had no right answer, Vesper picked up her rifle from the desk, the same M110 SAS she'd carried in the Hindu Kush, the same weapon that had fired 73 shots in 3 days, that had killed at 1,847 meters, that had saved 6 lives and avenged 47 deaths. "Tomorrow we go to the range. Today you learn why." Class dismissed. The students filed out, talking quietly, processing, beginning to understand what they'd signed up for. Vesper stood alone in the empty classroom, looked at her father's words on the board, remembered his voice, his lessons, his sacrifice. That evening she drove to the range, waited until everyone left, set up her rifle at the 1,800-meter line, the farthest target, the one most students wouldn't attempt for months. She settled into position. Her shoulder protested. She ignored it, had learned to ignore it, ran the calculations, wind, temperature, altitude, Coriolis, spindrift, all of it. Breathed, 62 beats per minute, natural pause, whispered, "Dad, they're good kids. You'd be proud of them." Fired. 3.4 seconds later, the distant target rang. Steel on steel, the sound of a perfect hit echoing across the empty range. Vesper smiled. Small, brief, private. She stood, packed her rifle, walked to her truck. Behind her, the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and red and purple, the same colors that had painted the Hindu Kush Mountains 18 months ago, the same light that had illuminated 6 soldiers being loaded into helicopters. Alive, saved, given another chance. Text appeared across the screen of consciousness, not literal, but true nonetheless. Captain Vesper Wren Thorne, USMC Scout Sniper 73, Certified Enemy KIA. Estimated total, 160 plus. Longest confirmed kill, 1,847 meters. Currently, Chief Instructor Scout Sniper School, trains 400 plus Marines annually. Gunnery Sergeant James Ironhawk Thorne, USMC Scout Sniper Instructor, 1987 to 2014. 204 confirmed kills. Desert Storm, Somalia, Afghanistan. KIA, Helmand Province, Afghanistan, 2014. Legacy, his daughter and every Marine she teaches, asterisk. The rifle range stood empty now, just wind and grass and targets waiting for tomorrow's students. A single brass casing lay on the ground where Vesper had fired. 300 Winchester Magnum, the casing that had held the bullet that had rung steel at 1,800 meters. Wind blew across the range, picked up the brass casing, carried it tumbling across the grass until it disappeared into the tree line. Like a ghost. Like a woman who'd saved 6 soldiers and then walked away before they could say thank you. Like a legacy that would live on, not in records or medals or official recognition, but in the hearts and minds of everyone who learned that excellence doesn't need to announce itself. It just needs to exist. And somewhere in America, at a small diner in Montana, 6 people sat at a table for 7, an empty chair, a glass of water, and a promise kept every year on the anniversary of the night they should have died, but didn't, because someone had heard them. Someone had run 18 miles. Someone had fired 73 shots. Someone had chosen 6 soldiers over mission safety. Someone named Wren. And that was enough. That was always enough.